Welcome to Programming with Python session 3. This session would be primarily focusing upon the topics that you have already learned, and this is more practical session. So let's move ahead and let us start this. In this session, we are going to practice some simple programs based on the knowledge that we have already gained from the earlier two sessions. Okay. The very first program that we are going to practice is printing the weekdays. Here is the problem description. Display the names of all the weekdays with each name printed on a separate line. Okay. Here is the output, how it should look like. Okay. So you see here, you have the weekdays printed one on each of the lines, right? So each weekday is printed on its own line, right? So this is the expected output. Okay. How many lines of output this program has to produce? It has to produce 7 lines of output. Does this program take any input from the user? No. Why? Because this program is not going to interact with the user in terms of input. This program does not read any input from the user, but it produces the output that is shown on this screen. Right? How do you write this program? Right. A simple print statement is used to produce the output in Python. Hence, you can use print statement and the output that we expect is the weekdays. So these weekdays can be used as arguments to print functions. And you can use 7 print functions or you can use a single print function. It's up to you. But for better readability of the program, here I have used 7 print statements, and these are the 7 print statements that you can see on the screen. And this is the program. When you execute this program, when you run this Python program, you should see all the weekdays printed on the screen. How many statements are there in this program? 7 statements are there in total in this program. This is a program with 7 statements. All right, let's get onto the practice session and let us practice this quickly. You know how to open IDLE, and all the programs that I am going today is from file editor mode. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to type in the code print Sunday. Sunday is a string, so it has to be enclosed within single quotes. Starting and ending has to be single quotes. And what you can also do is you can continue the same for rest of the weekdays. The function is same, but the arguments are different. right? Now I'm going to save this program, choose the path where you want to store your programs, right? And I want to save this as weekdays.py. Then I'm going to run this now. As you see, when you run this program, you got all the weekdays printed on the screen. Does this program read any user input? No. So you run this program any number of times, it produces the same output as long as you don't change the program, right? And this program doesn't expect any user input. Any questions? Are able to follow me? Please respond in the chat. You're able to follow me so far? A simple program to print the names of the weekdays. All right. This brings us to the end of first program, and let's move on to the next program of this session. This is a self-try program where this allows you to practice this on your own. The description of the program looks like this. Print the names of all English months, each on a separate line. I hope you got an idea, and the output looks like this. Right? Let's jump on to the programming and see how we can achieve the second part of the program. Second program of the session, right? So what you can do is you can use the same file. You can go with save as, and you can save this as whatever name you can give, but I'm using monthnames.py. And here I just need to print the names of the months one after the other. I need to add more. So what you can also do is you can copy some of the code and you can also paste it to speed up the process of programming. August, September, October, November, and December. You don't need this last statement. You can delete it. You can save this program and you can run this program. This is the expected output, and as you can see, the program produces the output as expected. And here, the same questions would repeat. Does this program take any user input? Again, the answer is no. Correct? There is no any user input that this program expects from the user. And I run the same program once again, it produces the same output any number of times you run this program, right? So this is a program that produces the same output every time it is executed. All right, let's move on to the next part of the program. So as you can see here, you need to write 12 statements to produce 12 lines of output for this, right? So have a look at it. The very first statement, as you have seen, and the same trend repeats for 12 times, right? The statement to print the name April, so on and so forth. So this is a list of 12 statements that are used to produce the output. All right, let's move on to the next program of the session. This is to print the name and age of a person. And you look at this program, what it asks us is to take the person's name and age as input and print the name and age as specified in the output format one. We need to understand the output format before we decide how to print the output. As you see here, here are the couple of examples given to you where if the input is John and 32 in the page part, the output expected is this. You just need to print the name and the age on the same line. In the second example, since the input of the person given as a John Wiki as a name, you need to first print that, and his age is 55 years, and you need to print that on the same line. Same thing goes with rest of the examples. Hope you understand how to produce the output, in what format you need to produce the output here, right? All right, let's jump on to the code directly. The second line is given to you, and the first statement that you have to write is to enter the name of the person. The reason being, the first input you expect from the user is name, and the second input that you expect from the user is age. So the order of statements is very important here. Okay. And of course, finally, you need to just print the name and age as it is, because by default, the print function uses a single space as a separator when the values are printed, right? Let us jump onto the code. I can save this as nameage.py, and you see, in the first place, I need to read the name of the user. To read the input, you need to use input function, and you can prompt to enter the name of the person, right? And this input can be stored in a variable named name, and then you're going to read the age of the person by using one more input function and prompt differently. Enter the age of the person. Here, if you want, you can use a colon for beautiful display. And here, since you have completed reading the input, you can print both of them, one after the other, separated by a comma. Save this file, run it. As you see here, this program is waiting for your input. This program is different than the earlier two programs that you have already practiced. This program reads user input when you execute it. So it is now prompting to enter the name of the person. I say John, and the age of that person is 32 years. You see, the program has produced output in the format that we expect it to do, right? Observe a single space between John and 32, and also look at the output statement that you have written here, right? So by default, the print statement uses the separator single space, and that single space has contributed to this single space in the output. So if we have to really map the output with the input, this is what you can do. The first line of your program, the first statement in your program, the prompt can be seen in the output on the output screen, and it also was waiting for you to pass the input, to enter the input, to provide the input. The moment you provided the input as John, it started executing the next statement. And the next statement also has a prompt. So that prompt has been printed and it is once again waiting for your input because you have used the input function, right? So the moment you provide the input for the second prompt, it reads it, it stores that 32 in the variable age, and then it executes the next statement. As a result, you can see the output printed as John space 32. This is how this program has completed its execution. Once again, this is a three statement program, and the difference between the earlier programs and this program is that this is called an interactive program because it interacts with the user for each of the input, for each of the run, right? And it prompts you to enter the input, it accepts that input, and it also can produce output, different output. For example, I run this same program second time. Okay, this time I'm going to pass the input as Ramesh and his age is 23. Obviously, the output produced is also different. In the earlier examples, you run the same program any number of times, it was producing the same output, right? You see, I ran this program three times and it has produced the same output. Whereas this program is an interactive program where it can prompt the user for input and it can produce output accordingly based on your input. So this is an interactive program, right? That is a difference between the first two programs that we have practiced and this third program. And in general, the programs that don't interact with the user but produce the same output again and again, those are called static programs. And the programs that interact with the user, read the response from the user, read the input from the user, and respond accordingly, these are interactive programs. So these are interactive programs. So you have developed an interactive program where it reads the input from the user and produces the output accordingly. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one is again to print the name and age of the person. However, the format of the output changes. Let us look at for the same set of input, what is output expected? The expected output is the name of the person and the age, but not on the same line, but on two different lines. Okay. So as you see here, the output expectation is different. Okay. So as you see here, this is how your program can read the input and it can produce output on two different lines. So the way you read the input doesn't change, but you just use two different print statements and save this as name age maybe 02 you can say. This is the second format with a slight difference. So the input statements won't change. They still ask, wait for you to pass the input when you execute this program. But each print statement produces output on a fresh line. So this will take care of producing the output in the required format. I'm using the same input. See, John, and his age is 32, but the output produced is different than the earlier. In the earlier case, the output was produced on the same line, whereas in this case, the output is produced on two different lines as per the requirement. Hence, this is how a slight difference in the output format can be achieved by making tweaks to the programs that you have already written. The same program, but the format is different again. Let us look at the output to understand the expected output format. Yes. So we need to add our own description. What you need to print is some description like the name of the person is whatever user has entered as input, and the age is whatever the age, okay, user has entered, and finally note a full stop operator at the end. Very important. You have to adhere to these output formats. The program that you write has to produce output in the same format. Okay. All right. Let's jump into the code, and there is no difference in the way the input is taken, but the way the output is to be produced is the name of the person is okay. Then comes the name of that person, which is stored in the variable name. Correct. So if you go back to the expectation, the name of the person is what you have to print, right? After printing that name, you have to also print and the age is. So add one more comma and you just type in and the age is, and that's all. Comma. From where will you get the age? Age is already stored in the variable by name age. So print it. And also you need to end it with a full stop. Hence, you need to add that full stop at the end of this print as another argument to this print function. However, let us run this program first to make sure. Give me a second. I just want to save it as a different file. Name is 3 and run this. Okay, again, I pass the same input and you see the name of the person is John, but you see here, you see two spaces coming out, whereas your expectation is only one space. Also, after 32, there shouldn't be any space as you see here. See, compare the output produced by your program with the expected output. Okay, there is a slight difference. So how can we address this? To address these differences, where is the first difference? So far, so good. After John, before printing and there are two spaces that are coming while the expectation is to get only one space. So if you execute this piece of code, of course you can try that out, okay, to validate where the problem is. After printing this, you have explicitly added a space here. That is what causing that extra space. So you remove this. There are two problems identified. I have addressed this problem. To check whether the problem is addressed or not, run this program again. Save it and run it. Because you made the change to the program, you have to save it and then run it again. So for the same input, right? Yes, now this problem has been addressed. However, you still see this problem. Where is this space between 32 and full stop coming from? Did I explicitly add it? Of course, no. I did not add that extra space. Then where is it coming from? This is where you will understand how the print function works. This print function takes this as a first argument, this as a second argument. Arguments are separated by commas. And this as a third argument, this as a fourth argument, and this as a fifth argument. So a function can take arguments, is what we have discussed already. And in this example, print function takes 5 arguments. This entire thing is a first argument, it is a second argument, third, fourth, and fifth argument. 5 arguments in total. However, every time the prints its arguments, it automatically adds a single space. Because of what? Because of the separator. So this is how the default value of the separator is described. Correct? If you run this same program once again by saving this, you will see the same output produced. John and input 32. As you see here, there is no difference between this output and this output. However, the extra space is coming here because of the separator. So what you can do is, you have to avoid this. One way of doing this is to just say that please don't use any separator. Does this help? Let us check. It won't help because you will observe a different output here now. You see here, the problem with the last space between 32 and full stop has gone. That means we have addressed that problem. We could address that problem. However, the space between is and end, right? Single space here, and after the name John, we expect a space to be seen, but that is not you are seeing here. So after is, this is where the problem is. John has to be surrounded by spaces, single space before and single space after, but that is not happening. Why is this happening? Why is this output different than this? In this case, what you said is, you instructed print function is, you don't take care of spaces, I will take care of spaces while printing. However, you did not take care of it properly. So what you can do is, you can add a space here. Of course, you have to also add a space here so that the name John will have single space before and single space after. Also, as you see the output, after is there is no space. So you should also go and add that space over there. Where can I do that? Let's put it here, right? After is you need a space. So put that space within single quotes. All that you have done here is you have changed the arguments to print function by adding extra space here to this argument, also by adding extra space to this argument, also by changing the value of this last argument to empty string or blank string. Let us try to run this to the same input, and you see here this is expected answer. Let us compare this output with what we are expecting, right? The name of the person is John and the age is 32. Immediately after that you have a space, you have a full stop. Yes, the code that you have written now produces the exact same output. So we are good with it. And of course, you can test your program by passing the rest of the inputs. John Wiki and 55 can be passed as input. For that, you can run the program once again and pass the input John Wiki and 55 years of age. See, the output varies based on the input value provided while you run the program. All right. So this is another interactive program, and you can test your program with rest of the inputs. Okay. All right. This is a code as you have seen. This is the same code that I have been writing, right? For that, that's too fast. Okay. So as you see here, some of the lines are not showing up properly. Sorry about that, but every input function has to have a closing bracket. Okay. So you can refer to this code here, how I have written. So there are double quotes used on the presentation, and you can of course use single quotes or double quotes. Okay, what is the exact difference? When to use what? All these things will be covered in subsequent sessions when we talk about strings. However, you can use double quotes or single quotes for now without any much difference. So I will pass the same input, John Wiki, Ken Wiki, and 55 years of age, and this also produces the same output as earlier one. Right. So this is how you can either use single quotes or double quotes, and you can produce output. All right. The same program, but you guess what? The format can be different than the earlier. Now, what is a format? The format is quite simple now. Okay. I'm sure you understood the format, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to also practice this on your own before we look at the solution. All right, let's jump onto the code. I would like to save this as four. Okay, there is no difference in the way you read the input. Okay, but all that we need is to change the format of the output. Name. Okay, and you just need a space. Of course, you need this last argument because you still need to have a full stop at the end. Okay, and you with this you said that I will take care of the spaces as per my requirement, so you have to use this extra space here, and also after printing the name you need a comma, and then you have to print the age. After that a colon. I'm just following the output. Look at the output and adjust the output to be produced. and then full stop. Save this, run it. John with is 32. So as you see here, name colon, single space, John, and then a comma, and then is colon, then you have 32 printed. And finally you have a full stop. Compare this with output expected. Yes, this is output expected. This is one way of achieving this output. However, this program as well instructs the print function that you don't go with your default behavior of using single space as a separator, but I will take care of it. That is how you have to yourself manage the spaces in the output that you want to produce. Again, how many arguments this print function takes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this print takes 6 arguments, right? And with that, we can see the output produced as per our expectation. All right, let's move on to the code. Okay. Next one is to find the area and perimeter of a rectangle. This is a description of the problem. Take the length and breadth of a rectangle as input and print its area and perimeter. Okay. This is again an interactive program because it reads the length and breadth from the user while running the program, and the program has to compute the area and perimeter, and then it has to print it. Let us look at the sample input and output for better understanding. So there are two inputs to be produced. Yes, those are 10 and 5 in the first example. 10 and 5 are what user is going to pass as input. Okay. And let us look at the expected output format. Great. The area and perimeter of the rectangle 10 by 5. Okay. 10 is a length and 5 is a breadth. Or after that you need a colon, and then you have to print the area computed. The area of a rectangle can be computed by multiplying the length with the breadth. So in this example, 10 times 5 is 50, which is a value of the area. Add a comma over there, and then the second one, which is 30, is nothing but the perimeter of the rectangle, which can be computed by adding up the length to breadth. 10 plus 5 is 15, and multiplying it by 2, because 10 and 5 are nothing but the sides of the rectangle, and in total you will be having 4 sides to a rectangle, and you have considered the length of one side in 10, and you have considered the length of the other side in 5, but there are two more sides left. So if you just double the product, sorry, double the sum, that will give you the perimeter. Okay. So in the second example, the area is 3 times 1, which is 3, and the perimeter 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 times 2 times 4 is 8. Similarly, in the third example, 22 times 10 is 220, which is 220. Sorry about that, there is a typo here. 220 should be the area, and 22 plus 10 is 32. 2 times 32 is 64, and 64 is a perimeter. And the last two are self-explanatory. All right, let's get into the coding. All right, so the first input, you need to read the length. Okay, read the length of the rectangle. And this program is different than the earlier couple of programs. In what sense? Because you are going to you are going to perform some arithmetic operations on the input for the first time in this example. Whereas in the earlier cases, you did not really perform any operations. You were just reading the input and you are producing the output accordingly in the output screen. However, for the first time, you are going to read the length, and for example, you want to store this in length variable, right? Similarly, breadth, enter the breadth of a rectangle, right? Okay, then what? Once you read these inputs, you need to find the area, and since you are computing this, you can store it in a different variable. You can use another variable in your program to store the sorry computed value. Similarly, to find the perimeter, you have to use, generally in mathematics we write it as 2 times LB. L means length and B means breadth. But remember, in programming, every operator has to be explicitly mentioned. So you have to explicitly write 2 times length plus breadth. Sorry about that. I was referring to the area. You may write the formula as for length as LB in mathematics, where L is a length and B is a breadth. LB meaning L into B, L star B, or product between these two values. However, in programming, you cannot write length breadth like that, because if you write it as length breadth, it treats length breadth as a single variable, and this variable is nowhere in this entire scope of the program, so it throws you an error, name error. Okay, so you should use every operator explicitly. So to find the perimeter and store it in a separate variable, you can use this way: 2 times length plus breadth. Okay, next one is just to produce the output. In what format? Look at the format. The area and perimeter of the rectangle. Let us achieve that so far. The area and perimeter of the rectangle are, okay, the area and perimeter of the rectangle. Sorry, you have to mention the dimensions. So how do you get the dimension? If you look at this output, right? First 10, what is it? 10 is nothing but the length. So type in the value of the variable length here. Okay, then after that you need to use a into mark. To get this into mark in programming, you can use x, small x, right? Then you have to print 5. In the first example, 5. 5 is nothing but the value stored in breadth variable. So you have to type in breadth. After that, you have to use R symbol, R as a text. And then colon, put it in the same string, right? Then you have to print area and perimeter, computed area and perimeter. So this can be your area variable, and then this can be your perimeter variable. And look at it, I'm not suppressing or changing the value of either separator argument or end argument of print in this example. So what happens? It reads two inputs. One is the length of the user and the second is the breadth of the user. It stores them in two respective variables, length and breadth. Then it computes the area by itself by executing this line in the code. and stores the result in the variable called area. Then it also evaluates this expression, it computes the value, and it stores the result in another variable called perimeter. Then it comes to the next statement, and it's output statement. So it produces the output as it is. The area and perimeter of the rectangle. Okay, then since you did not override the value of a separator, it adds one extra line after rectangle, and then it prints the length value which is user provided input. After that it adds one extra space, then it prints x which is cross. It adds one more space before printing the breadth value, and then it prints one extra space before printing r. So there should be colon. It also adds one extra space after colon because separator is, because it is about to print another value. Area, the value computed, comma, another space, and then it is going to print perimeter. I guess we need to add comma, right? Yeah, there is a comma to be added in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also add comma in between. You can use single quote or double quote as I said, but you can use a comma here and the space will be automatically taken care because every argument while it is printed, it will be separated by single space as a separator, right? By default. So save this, run this. Length. Let us get back and check. Take the first example, 10 and 5. So I pass 10 as input and 5 as input. Can't multiply. Exactly. This is what I was referring to. As I said, this program is different than the earlier programs. How is this different? What you are trying to do here is, if you look at the output carefully, the error that you get, you got, the error is in this line. And what it says is can't multiply sequence by non-integer type string. Here, this operation is not considered as a valid operation by Python. Why? What is a data type of length and what is a data type of breadth? How to know the data type of a variable? Type, right? And for example, you want to know the type of length, you can use type of length. Type is a function, right? Similarly, you know the type, you understand the type of breadth, okay? And just print it to understand what type of these two variables are. As you can guess, and as we already covered, you know that in Python, every input by default is treated as string. So 10, for you it sounds to be an integer, but as you see here, both 10 and 5 are treated as strings. So data type is something that comes into picture, comes to your mind, right? Data type has some confined set of operations. So can you multiply two strings? It is not possible. You cannot multiply two strings. That is what the meaning of this error is. Can't multiply sequence. Here sequence is nothing but a string by a non-integer type string. So what it is complaining about is you are trying to multiply two strings where it is not possible, is what the language interpreter says. That means you cannot multiply a string with the other. Then how can I find the length multiplied by breadth? So what you can do is you have to convert the user given string into an integer. In this example, you can go with integer for now, assuming that the length and breadth are given as integer as always in this example only. So this is a typecasting is what we already talked about in earlier sessions, where you read the input, convert it into integer, and then store it in the variable length. Similarly, read the breadth. I know it treats it initially as a string, but typecast, convert it into integer, store it in breadth, and then proceed ahead with two operations. Now, if you ask for the type, you can again print the type of length. Also, you can print the type of breadth. Okay. Now you will see that the type of length is integer and the type of breadth is also going to be an integer because you have explicitly converted them, typecasted them. Typecasting is nothing but converting one type of data into another so that you can perform some meaningful operations. You see, now the length and breadth are treated as integers, whereas they were treated as strings if you don't do any typecasting. Now this statement makes sense because you can multiply an integer with another integer. So now you should be able to compute the area. Also, you can add one integer to an integer and it can multiply the sum with an integer constant and the result can be stored in perimeter. So this all makes sense. And look at the output has produced. The area and perimeter of the rectangle 10 by 5 are 50. There is a space, unexpected, unwanted space, and then 30. So if you compare this output with the output format that we are expecting, there is just one slight difference. The difference is that between the area and perimeter, there should be a comma, but not any space in between. However, you see an extra space that is coming in here. Where is it coming from? Look at the code. And you don't need this. And you know how to comment the code. You can add a hash symbol so that that code, though it is available in the program, it won't get executed. It will be ignored during program execution. So this line of code has become commented, right? Became a comment in the code that won't get executed. Let me run this program once again to show you that that line doesn't produce any output. As you see here earlier, it was printing this, and that statement is still there in your program. Since you have commented that out, it won't be executed at all. And this is output produced. So now the next step is to address this extra space that is coming in. Okay, where is it coming from? As you see here, everywhere after printing the next argument, it is adding extra space. Similarly, same thing goes here. Before it prints comma, it is giving you an extra space. To address that, what is the approach? Yes. What you can say is, see, I will take care of the spaces wherever I want. You don't take care of it, is what you need to say. And you need to add spaces as per your wish, right? So that you can avoid this extra space coming out here. Okay. How do you tell to print function that I will take care of print separator by overwriting the default value of single separator with empty string. With that, you need to take care of wherever spaces you need, okay, before you print anything. That's where I have introduced the spaces myself, and here I don't need any space, so I have just left it as it is. Save this file, run the program, try to test the same program with the same. Here, rest of all is good, right? But you expect a single space after the comma, whereas you don't see that. Look at the output. You expect a single space after printing the area and then comma, right? There is a single space that you see in the output. So, where to address this? After the comma, you are expecting a space. So, you add a space after the comma. Save this, run this. Try the same set of input. Yes. This makes sense, right? This is the exact format that we are expecting the output in, right? Let us try the second input, 3 and 1. Yes. Run this program for the inputs 3 and 1. 3 and then 1. Yes. The area and perimeter of the rectangle 3 by 1 or colon 3 comma space 8. So all these things are very important, especially when you're going for competitive programming. The formats of the output should be matched. Okay, then only the grader will give you the marks. Hence, while you are practicing the code, while you are learning how to program, it is very important to understand or pay attention on each and every piece of the detail so that you will master the concepts. All right. Well, before we move ahead with the next program, and of course the same code that you will see here again, you read the length, right? And then you read the breadth, correct? See, typecasting happened here because you used int function or int converter before you assign it to the length. Now you can perform the multiplication operation between two integers. You can also perform um, any kind of operation between these two integers like addition, subtraction, all the arithmetic operations are allowed. So you add them up and then multiply the sum with 2 and store the result in another variable. Finally, you print it. Okay, in the same format. Format is, I'm leaving the formatting to you because based on the expectation, you have to be in a position to write the code based on the need, based on the requirement. And this program has 5 statements in it, and it is an interactive program because every time you run this program, it interacts with the user, it reads the input from the user, then it can produce output accordingly. Many people are asking like where can I get this material and all that. So as always, this is our website, technolearnit.com, and you can go through this website to understand what kind of courses we offer. Okay, and also if you want to contact us, here are the contact details, and you can also find us on all these social media platforms. And we highly encourage every one of you to subscribe and support us on these platforms. And coming to the resources, this is a third session. By the end of the third session, you will get all the resources uploaded over here under resources Python. Also, the next live session date and time will be updated here. Okay. So this is a single website where you will get all the information that we are discussing, and you can also go to the links of each session, and here are the topics that you can refer to. Okay, this is all what you can just go through, and anything like whatever we have discussed the last time, all those topics are covered here. And this is how there are some hands-on exercises, there are some um, concept builder exercises. As you see, what is a variable? For the first time, if you are coming to programming, you should understand what a variable is, what is meant by a variable, right? So there are concept builders, there are activity sheets where you will start writing the code on yourself. There are also hands-on exercises, and there are variety of resources available for you to download and consume and get better at programming. All right. Also, this is our YouTube channel, and every day we will be posting a quiz, and the quiz questions would be based on what has been covered so far in the sessions. So that you don't miss anything, you will continue to be in touch with the subject. So here, of course, these are all in the form of playlists as well. You can refer to this playlist, and you can also um, get more command on the subject. and every day you will be getting the shorts if you subscribe to this, and all the live sessions you'll be getting notifications, right? And all the playlists will be available here. So I highly encourage every one of you to subscribe to this channel so that you'll get all these updates, and you can learn and become better at programming. All right. So in this example, I'm just quickly running through this. You've already seen how we can compute the area and perimeter, and you can also generate the output as per the expectation, as per the format given in the expectation, right? All right. Now, the other way of doing the same is the first two statements won't change. However, this is something that Python allows us to do, where we can club multiple computation statements into single statement. And that's what I did here. That's what you see here. Since you are going to compute two different values, one is the area and the second one is perimeter. Earlier you were doing this on two different lines of program, or you are using two different statements to do this, right? However, you can club them together, and this is a way you can do that. Every variable can be separated by a comma, right? Area is one thing you want to compute, and next you also want to compute the perimeter on the same line, same instruction. So area comma perimeter is what you are seeing on the left hand side of assignment operator. On the right hand side, what is the first variable that you want to update? Area, because area um, comes first in the order that you have written it, right? So how do you compute the area? Area can be computed by length times breadth. So length times breadth is something that you would write for the first time after the assignment operator on the right hand side. Then add a comma, and then think of the next following variable, which is nothing but perimeter. So what is the value you want to fill with this, fill in this perimeter variable? It is nothing but another expression. So 2 times length plus breadth is what you have written over there. So as a result of this statement, there are two computations that happen. Length times breadth is one computation, and that will, its value, the final product will be assigned to a variable called area. And the second computation, 2 times length plus breadth, will be assigned to the variable called perimeter. All right. This is one good thing that Python supports us to do. So I'm going to convert these two statements into a single statement. How can I do that? Area comma perimeter. Yes, area comma perimeter is equal to length times breadth, comma, and then you don't need perimeter as a separate statement again. You just do this, and that's all. Single statement to perform multiple computations. Single statement to update multiple variables. The same line, right? And you can then print. There is no any difference in the output format. So I'm not going to touch that line of code, and I'm going to run this. So again, try it out with the same input 3 and 1. Yes. Do you see any difference between this line of output and this line of output? Absolutely not. That means the computation has gone well with the change in the program, right? That means this is something that you can try in Python, which reduces the number of lines of code, correct? Less number of code, less maintenance overhead. Always try to reduce the number of statements in the programs that you write. It could be any language, but that should be your motto. All right. And the output statement won't change, of course. Okay. And in this example, we have 4 statements instead of 5 statements. Okay. All right. The same program can also be written differently this way, where interestingly, I did not use any additional variables to compute and store the result. I am computing the result on the fly in the print function itself and producing the output, right? And if you see, there are just 3 statements, 3 lines of code in your program, because the area and perimeter variables are used just to compute the value and store them temporarily and produce the output accordingly. where if you have to avoid that, if you want to reduce the number of variables in your program, you can completely get rid of this. So you can put a comment over here. You can convert this statement into a comment so that it won't get executed at all. And in the place of length and breadth, these two variables are anyways needed and they will come. In the place of area is being updated with what? Length and breadth in the earlier case. Put that same thing over here. Then perimeter. Perimeter was this variable and this was being updated with this. So just substitute the value the value or substitute perimeter with the value that it has to really compute on the fly and produce as an output. Let us try this out. For the same input 3 and 1, it produced the same output. Okay, all right. This is how there can be different ways to write the same program and achieve the same kind of output. But when you are writing the programs, keep in mind that the number of lines should be reduced as minimum as possible, right? And also the number of operations as well, so that your program will run fast in general. All right. The next one is to find the area and perimeter of a square. And I'm sure you can try this program on your own. So here is a description of the program. Take the side of a square as input and print its area and perimeter. Okay. Being a square, for all the four sides of it will be the same. So just one input is enough here, which is in contrast to the rectangle program that you have practiced just before, right? So look at the output format. More or less it is one and the same, right? The area and perimeter of square. Square would be always having all the sides the same. So 10 by 10 or 5 by 5 or x by x, whatever it is. So this is what it would be, right? Make sense? All right. Let us jump on the coding. Here, the input that you need to read, I would call it as side because using meaningful variable names makes much sense. Enter the side of the square, and there is no any second input. Only one input is what you are going to read. I'm going to save this as square.py. All right, and you don't need to worry about type and all. You can of course compute the area and perimeter in the same line. So area is side by side times the side, right? Similarly, the perimeter is 4 times side. The area and perimeter of the square are square side by perimeter side only. And here, of course, let me do one thing. Let me comment on this line, copy it, paste it once again. And here I would say I have already computed in two different variables, no? So I can use area. I can also use perimeter over here. All right. Let us try the same input. The first input is 10. So 140 is what the expectation is here. Yes. So sorry, the output is wrong here. 10 by 10 is 100. 140 is the expectation. So the slide is wrong. So, but again, 100 times, 10 times 10 is 100 and 4 times 10 is 40. The program has produced the right output. Okay. Is the slide wrong everywhere? No. Okay. Let me run the second test case. So second example of input. When the input is 1, the area should be 1 and the perimeter is 4, and that is what you can see in the output as well. The second example makes sense. Similarly, the third one, I'll run the same program once again. This is an interactive program. As you can see, 22 is the input, 484 and 88, 484 and 88. So yes, you have achieved this, and you can test the rest of the cases. You can test your program with the rest of the input and make sure it works well. All right. Well, and again, as I said, if you want to reduce the number of lines of code, don't even compute this explicitly, right? And you know how to achieve that. Comment on this line. You don't want to execute this. Then you can, sorry, you can also comment on this line as well, right? And here you can directly use side by side, right? So copy this and paste it here. Similarly, 4 times the side is what is being was computed and sent to perimeter. So you can print that as it is. Run it, save it before you run, and same input 22. Yes, it is 484 and 88. So instead of using some extra variables, you can do this way. All right, this is your next program where you can find the area and perimeter of a given square, area and perimeter of square with given side measurement. So you can use the same statement to compute both the values. Make sense? And you can print it without using any. Of course, you have used two additional variables, so you can use them. If you want to get rid of those variables, what you can do, you can directly use print statement, and you can directly write compute the value on the fly when the print statement gets executed. At the time of the print statement getting executed, it will compute the side times side and it will print it. Similarly, it computes 4 times side and it will print it. All right. The next one is to find the area of a triangle. Read the base and height of a triangle. Compute and print its area with one decimal digit. Well, to find the area of a triangle, we need to know its base as well as its height. So let us look at some examples. So in the first case of input, right, the base is 10 and the height is 6. So to compute the area of a triangle, you can use a formula half of the times of base times of height. So half of 1 by 2 times or 0.5 times of 10 times of 6. So 10 times of 6 is 60, half of it is 30, so that is where you get the output as 30. But the expectation is to limit the output to a single digit in the fraction. So you can see that as 30.0. In the second case, it's same. 8 times 5 is 40, half of 40 is 20, so that is how you achieve that. Okay. So this is how you can see that all the output produced. In the last example, base is 9 and height is 9. If it is the way, and half of that 81 is 40.5, and the output you see is 40.5. Okay. All right. How do you achieve this? Let us jump onto the programming. So you can read the base of the triangle. Okay, I call it as a base. And is there, yes, of course, typecasting is required. And you can also read the height, enter the height, the triangle. No, right? Two input. So now you can, of course, if you don't want to really compute it explicitly and store it in separate variables, you can want to do it on the fly. It is just only area, right? So area of triangle is, look at the format expected. The area of the triangle is mid colon, and of course you can use, you can use 0.5 times base times height. Do you need a full stop at the end? No. But again, very interestingly, you need to limit the result to single decimal point. Where do you address it? Okay, let me show you the present output, and then you can tweak the program to produce output as per the requirement. I'm going to run this. Say the base is 9 and height is also 9. The expectation is 40.9 and this is what you get, right? Let me run this same program again for an input of 402. The output is 4.0, right? So this is how you will get this kind of output. And let us try it with 15 and 4. One more time I'm going to run this program. See, so this is how you can achieve this kind of output, right? And yeah, you don't need this comment at all. Okay. And say for example, now there is a twist in the output. So you are supposed to print the output limited to two decimal places, not just one decimal place. Then what you can do, or what you should do, how can you achieve that? You should use percentage. The formatted output is what we have already discussed in earlier sessions. If you have missed that, I would suggest you to use the playlists, earlier live sessions, and refer to them. And remember, here you are going to use that same formula, zero point 0.5 times base times height. And whenever you are using format specifiers, there shouldn't be any comma, okay, between the arguments. So save, run it. 15 and 4. Does it make any difference? Yes, it makes a difference. Now we are explicitly maintaining two decimal places in the output. Earlier it was just one space which was coming, one decimal digit after the decimal point. But now you have a control how the output has to be produced by using this format specifier. Make sense? All right, let us jump on. So you can practice, you can try these different kinds of inputs, and you can make sure that you understand and you produce, you will get the expected output. Okay, the same thing, but again, interestingly, the conversion was to a float. Of course, it can be to a float or it can be to an integer. It all depends on the type of input that you receive. If the height and if either the base or the height, right, if they can be float values, meaning they can have decimal or fractional values, then you can of course convert the input into float. Same thing, you can go with height. You can, in this example, I'm assuming that both base and height are floats, and you can use extra variable like this to compute it. and then you can print. The area of the triangle is whatever the area computed. But again, if you have to limit this to whatever is asked, you can use the format specifier as I have shown you. All right. The next one is to find the perimeter of a triangle. Quite simple. Again, read the sides of a triangle, compute and print its perimeter with one decimal digit. Here are a couple of examples, and any triangle will have three sides. So perimeter is nothing but just to sum up the measures of the sides, and that is what constitutes the perimeter. So in the first example, you are going to read three inputs, 3, 4, and 5, and the sum of them. 3 plus 4 is 7, 7 plus 5 is 12. And since the ask is to limit the output to single decimal point, decimal digit after the decimal point, it is we are explicitly putting it as 0. Same thing goes with all these examples. All right, let us jump on to the code. So, how do you read the input? You can use a variable. Can I have a variable by name side1? Of course, yes. If you refer to rules to be followed while naming the variables, which was discussed and covered in the earlier live sessions, if you did not attend them, I would suggest you to watch them to get a thorough understanding on the rules to be followed while naming the variables. All right. So yeah, I'll treat this as float, right? Side of a triangle can be float. Yeah. Enter the first side of the triangle. Yeah. This is the first input. The second input, and remember, since this is a different, this can be different input, you store it in a different variable. Variable names are different, so they will be stored in different variables. Third one, right? Enter the third side of a triangle. Then you can of course compute it upfront. Perimeter is computed by adding side 1 to side 2, side 3. And I'll just get rid of this comment because we don't need this comment every time. And then the perimeter of the triangle is, and if you are supposed to limit to whatever explicitly asked, you can just limit it to number of digits and all. And here you can directly print perimeter. Save this as triangle perimeter or some name, whatever. Run this. Sorry, run this. Let us take the examples 3, 4, 5. For example, 3 is the first side, 4 is the second side, and 5 is the third side, and the expectation is 12. Again, here, since my program, the way I have written the program, it is limiting the number of decimal digits to 2. I'm getting 2 digits. But if you wanted to limit to 1 as the output expected here, you can, of course, change the program to 1 and then run the same thing again. You get exact output as expected. 3, 4, and 5, yes, 12.0. Yeah. So this is how you can write simple programs. Okay. And the next one is to understand the same code that I have written. I'm sure you can understand this, right? Read three inputs and store them in three separate variables, three different variables. Yeah. Compute the perimeter upfront if you wish to. Add the sides, store it in perimeter. Finally, produce the output in the expected format. Okay. All right. The next one is to find the area and circumference of a circle. In the case of circle, we use terminology circumference that refers to perimeter. So read the radius of a circle as input and print its area and circumference with two decimal digits. All right, let us look at some examples, right? And the output format is also given to you, and you have to adhere to this output format. Okay, let us jump onto the code directly and attempt this. For this, you need to know radius of the circle. As to written radius, there is no more input required, only one input. And you can compute area as pi r square. Pi is 1.34. Assume that you are using only 3.14 as pi value. It can be any, it can go to additional digits of precision, but for now I'm treating it as 3.14 pi means. Then radius times radius. Similarly, the perimeter can be computed using 2 times pi times radius, right? And look at the output format, the area and circumference. All right, the area and circumference of the circle, right? Or okay, you need to print the value and then comma and then two decimal digits, right? So you can use percentage point to f, comma, again percentage point to f, and here remember, when you are printing more than one value with formatted string with percentage here, you should use brackets, percentage, and then put all the variables in these brackets, and finally close the bracket for print function. That's all we are done. Okay, area and perimeter. Save this, run this. Let us try the first case 10.5. 10.5. So the output has to be limited to two digits, right? 346.19. 346. Sorry about this. This is not up to date. So yeah, definitely the program, whatever has been produced, that is the expected result. Okay. And of course, you can try with any other input, 1.8 or anything, by running the same program once again. So I am not comparing this with the numbers on the slide because the slide is not showing the right results. But anyways, this is what the area, and this is the circumference of the circle, which has a radius value as 1.8. All right. And I would like to also show you a different way of writing the same code for our convenience. Okay. And this is what you already know, where you can compute the values of more than one variable in the same statement. This is okay, but I'm going to show you one more helpful technique. So as a whole, you can see three statements in this program. Well, the second approach is like this. And let me first explain it and then we'll come back. What you can do is, here is something you are using 3.14, here is something you are using 3.14. But if you really look at the value of the value of pi, which is 3.1415, and there are more and more digits, right? More accuracy you need, more accurate result you need to consider more and more digits after this 3.14, right? So for example, the ask is to consider pi value is 3.1415, for example. Then where all you need to change that code, you have to change it here. Wherever you are using that pi value as 3.14, you have to change it everywhere as 3.1415, right? Two places in this example. Let me show you. There can be a slight difference. Like for example, let me go with 10.5 once again. As you see, here it was 346.19 because you consider only two digits after the decimal, whereas here you can see slight increase in the fractional part. Sometimes it may increase the decimal part as well if the radius is so big, right? And here 65.94, now you got 65.97, right? So this is how considering more digits of the decimal point can increase the accuracy of your result. But again, if nothing is mentioned, it's up to you. Generally, you consider two decimal points after the, sorry, two decimal digits of the decimal point. All right. Now, what if there are multiple statements? Here it is only two statements which were using this pi value, so it resulted into very easy operation for me. But what if your program has hundreds of statements and you have to manually go and search and replace everywhere? No. For that, what you can do is you can take a variable and store the value here itself into the variable, and then wherever you want to use that, don't use the value but use a variable value. How does this benefit? Let me first show you that this is quite simple operation. No, it should work as it is. Let me go with 10.5 again. Since you have considered only two digits after the decimal point, they should match with this. Yes, it matches, right? Now, so now the requirement has changed and it asks you to consider four digits after the decimal point. Interestingly, this is the only place where you can make a change, but the change will be reflecting throughout your program. That is a benefit of using the value of such constants. These are generally constants in mathematics as well, right? So similar in programming, you can treat this as a constant. However, Python doesn't differentiate between constant variables and volatile variables, right? But generally constants are named with capital letters. That itself is an indication that it is treated as constant. But of course, Python will always allow you to change its value anywhere and everywhere in the program. However, it is your responsibility as a developer or the programmer to make sure that its value is not changed unless it is really needed to be changed. All right, let me run this program once again. I changed only in one place, remember. I'll use the same 10.5, and you see this matches with this, right? That means it has considered four digits as per the latest program change. So if you want to further go and increase, there is only one place for you to change it now. You need not go and search for all the statements in your entire program and change it everywhere. That is a overhead of maintenance of the code. But if you go with such approaches, this will really help you to easily maintain your code. All right. So that is what we are going to see in this example. Okay. Only one place for you to change. If at all you have to change in future. Well, the next one is to compute the simple interest. The description of the program goes like this. Read the principal, rate of interest, and time in years. Compute and print the simple interest with the two decimal digits. Well, a very simple, easily understandable program. Again, everything is self-explanatory here. Okay, so you can see all this. Let us jump onto the coding. How many inputs? Three inputs. And assume that everything can be afloat here. Principal input, enter the principal. Then there are two more inputs to be taken from the user. So ask them enter the rate of interest. So rate of you see this variable name, it looks a little bit odd, right? So this is where snake case comes into play. Rate of interest. Every word is separated by underscore. This is snake case is what you already know, right? We talked about the rules to be followed while naming the variables, and we also talked about best practices to name the variables in Python. In snake case is what we use, right? Next one, time period, or I will just say time. Enter the time in years. Okay. All right. All the three inputs are given to you, and now all that you need to do is to simply compute the simple interest. Again, simple is one word, interest is the other word. I can use snake case variable naming convention. Simple interest is how do you find the simple interest, which is nothing but principal times rate of interest times time means number of years, right? In this example, I'm making everything to be simple, okay? By 100, yeah, yeah. Of course, you can put principal rate of interest and time in brackets and all whatever you want to do. Up to you. PNR by 100, or you can put it usually by PRT by 100 or whatever it is. Okay, it's up to you. And then look at the format. The simple interest is quite simple now. Is simple interest is 2 digits. I am good with it. And then the result, the computed result is stored in simple interest. So yeah, you can of course use this way. Save it. These braces are not mandatory. These are redundant if you want to continue because you are using only one variable in the formatted output. All right, now my program is asking for principal 1018 and 2, right? Let me go back. Yeah, 1018 is the rate of interest, 2 years of tenure, 360.00. Yes, 360.00. Yeah, so this is how we can compute the simple interest and produce output accordingly. Same statements. Snake case variable naming convention used. Finally producing the output in whatever format suits us based on the expected output. Again, this is a simple program which has 5 lines of code. All right. Before jumping on to the next program, I would suggest you to refer to this website. Okay, and this is official website where all the resources of the program will be shared with you, right? And if you want to if you want to know more about this organization and what are the courses that we offer, you can go through this page under courses. And if you want to get in touch with us, these are different modes you can interact with us. And here also, here you can also see some social media platforms on which you can support us, and you can subscribe and get the updates from us on a daily basis. And especially for the resources of these sessions, you can refer to resources tab on this website, under which you will be getting the resources session wise. So for the first session, whatever the topics that have covered and all the corresponding material will be available here. These are all the URLs. You can click and get those details, and you can refer to the notes or the resources, and you can get confidence with programming. Also, this is the same page where you need to keep an eye, because the next live session date and time will be mentioned here, and the link to the YouTube live will be available on this. So this is again in the URL, and the date and time will be updated when will be the next session and all. By the end of this session, session 3 content material will be updated here, and also the live session link will be updated here. This is very important for you to plan your next live session, and get more confidence on programming. All right, let us jump on to the programming. This is our next program. Okay, right? Welcome back. This is our next program. The program asks us to compute the compound interest. So read the principal, rate of interest, and time in years. Compute and print the compound interest with two decimal digits. Well, this is not very much different than the earlier program. However, the way we compute, or the formula that we use for computation, would be different, obviously, right? So principal, rate of interest, and time period, again the same thing that you are going to take as input, right? And but the computed interest, and not only interest, you are also supposed to print the total amount. Okay, you're supposed to print the compound interest accumulated as well as the total amount. Okay, all right, let us jump onto the coding. So again, same input, rate of principal, rate of interest, and time period, or the number of times you are going to add the interest to the principal in an year, is what you can, for now, just to make it simple, assume that this is time or the number of times. Okay, and now instead of calling it as, okay, first of all, when you are applying the formula of compound interest, which is nothing but principal times 1 plus rate of interest by 100, right? So I'm going to take this rate of interest by 100, p into 1 plus r by 100 to the power n. What is the to the power operator in Python? Do you remember the four? Do you remember the arithmetic operators that we have discussed in the earlier sessions? So the exponent operator is, to the power, or exponent operator is 2 stars without any space in between. And then this is nothing but. So this is how you are going to use a different formula to compute the, okay, what is this going to give you? This is going to give you the amount, the final amount. That means for this principal, this principal grows to this amount within a time period of this much, with an interest rate of this much. So principal times 1 plus rate of interest by 100 to the power. To the power is exponentiation symbol in Python. So star star. So this entire thing, right? This principal will be multiplied by this to the power at time. This is how you compute the amount. But you are also supposed to compute the compound interest, right? You can call it as interest, otherwise simply, just not to add any additional confusion, right? So amount, this is a total amount and interest. How do you find the interest if you know the amount? Simply you subtract principal from the amount. Whatever is remaining, that is nothing but your interest from. So this is the principal to begin with, this is the time, this is the rate of interest, and you compute the amount after this time number of time period, which gives you the amount based on the compound interest applied. And then you are also supposed to compute the interest. So interest is nothing but the computed amount minus the principal, which gives you the interest. This is the interest you compute. And here, look at the format again. The format is compound interest colon and total amount. Okay, well, so compound interest limited to two decimal places, right? And then total amount with a semicolon. So you can put a semicolon and total amount. Total amount. Colon. Yes. And you need amount first. Sorry. Yeah, compound interest. Interest part is the first one. So first one is first. Whatever is coming here, compound interest. So call it as interest. And you are printing more than one variables with formatter. So use brackets. Then print the amount. Amount is stored in amount. And that's all. We're done. Save. Done. Let us take an example here. 1018 under 2. Sorry. 1018 under 2. Not all arguments converted during step. Okay, somewhere in the conversion I'm missing. Float. What is the line number? Print compound interest to total amount. Okay, all right. So the thing is here the format specifier is not mentioned, but you are giving more than number of format specifiers to be printed, so it doesn't know what to print. So we have to once again use the second format specifier, right? And then save this and then run it once again. So now 1018 under 2. Yes. So 392.4 is compound interest computed and the total is 1392.4. Yes, right? You can also try the same with rest of the programs, rest of the input, and make sure you produce the output as expected. Well, this is how you are going to read the input, the same thing that we just tried. Makes sense? And then finally print as per our wish. And if you want to go with two different print statements, as you see here, of course, let us try that as well. I'll quickly cover that as well. Here I have printed the output in one print. But if you want to go with two print statements, what happens? The output won't be produced in the way you expect it. The reason being, okay, so we want to stop here, right? While printing. This is just a compound interest and you print amount, total amount, right? And get rid of this. And then this is amount. And remember, we have used two print statements. If you just run this for the same set of input, 80 and 2, you see the output is produced on two different lines. Why? Because this is the default behavior of print. A print, after it has executed itself, it just moves to the next line and moves the cursor to the next line. So the output is produced on two different lines, but the expectation is to produce the output in the same line. And if you still want to use two print statements for whatever reasons, what you can do is you can use end, and you can say you can override the default value of coming to the new line character, coming to the new line with a new line character slash and with a semicolon space. What you're also saying is, okay, you print whatever you want, but finally don't go to the next line, but put a colon and then print a space and wait there. And next comes the next print statement, which will continue to print from there on. Let me save this and run this for you. Sorry. Same input, retain and yes. You use two different print statements, but the output is produced on the same line. This is how you can use this separator and also the end, right? Arguments of print to manipulate the output in the way you want it. So that is how you can see the code here. Okay. All right. This brings us to the end of session 3. And the main focus in this session was to do some programming, become comfortable, become confident in programming. And all the programs that we have written so far are less than 10 lines of code. So these are very simple programs for you to practice to get confident with programming. All right. With this, I conclude this session and I encourage you to subscribe for our channel so that you'll get the next updates. And also you follow on all the social platforms like Instagram, etc. All right. And refer to our website as I have shown in between this session, and also make a note of the next session. Okay, and also refer to the uh, learning material that will be available by the end of this session on our website under resources. With that, I conclude this session and thank you all for joining me for this and take care. Happy coding. Bye.